Hi, I'm Patrick. Today I'll be looking at sports that took a shocking turn, catching everyone completely off guard and changing the athletic world forever. From a sponsored surf shoot in shark active waters, to a football camp heat setup that slowly turns into a serious medical emergency over several days. It was August 9th, 2015. A sponsored night surf shoot was staged off Recife, Brazil, in coastal waters known for strong currents, shifting sandbars, and recent bull shark activity near estuary outlets. Local surfers and lifeguards had already warned that conditions worsened after dusk, especially around river-fed channels. Darius Kincaid, 28, was a professional surfer working under sponsorship for a regional surf and lifestyle brand. He had built his career largely through filmed content, high-visibility campaigns, and stylized surf sessions designed for digital platforms rather than competitive rankings. The Recife shoot was part of a larger promotional campaign centered around night surfing, featuring drones, shoreline lighting rigs, and a custom LED-lit surfboard designed to maximize visual impact on camera. The production had been planned around a precise visual layout, with lighting calibrated to match wave timing and drone flight paths. Despite repeated input from local surf guides advising caution due to recent bull shark sightings near estuary channels, the location was not changed. The decision was driven largely by visual framing requirements, sponsor expectations, and scheduling constraints tied to the broader campaign rollout. There was a clear back and forth earlier in the day about moving slightly up the coast, but the setup was already locked in place. By late evening, offshore conditions had shifted slightly from earlier forecasts. Wave sets became more irregular over shallow sand formations, and currents near the filming zone grew less predictable. Darius entered the water with a small support crew observing from a distance in a production boat, while drones and shoreline lights tracked his movement across the illuminated surface. As he paddled into the first wave, the LED board lit him up against the dark water, almost like a moving spotlight cutting across the surface. From the shore and the drones above, it was easy to track him the whole time. He rode out a few clean sections without much trouble, staying steady through smaller breaking waves while the cameras kept pace just off his line. During a later approach, he moved into a wave forming over a shallow sand ridge. The wave broke unevenly, and he lost balance mid-transition, resulting in a wipeout in the impact zone. He separated from the board as turbulence increased, entering a section of water where visibility was already reduced beneath the surface due to lighting glare and sediment movement. The board kept drifting nearby, still glowing with its LED lights, and easy to spot from both the boat and the shore. At first, people on the production boat thought it was just another wipeout like the earlier ones they'd already filmed. But when he didn't come back up after a few seconds longer than expected, the mood on the boat shifted and they started really looking for him instead of just following the shot. People on the boat started scanning the same spot over and over, trying to find a pattern that wasn't there. Response efforts began when it became clear he was not regaining position in the water. Support personnel and local responders were dispatched into the surf zone, navigating breaking waves and shifting currents to reach him. He was recovered from the water and brought back to shore, where resuscitation attempts began immediately. He was transported to a nearby medical facility shortly after extraction. Despite continued emergency intervention, he did not regain consciousness and was pronounced dead later that night. A post-incident review documented that local warnings regarding bull shark activity near estuary-fed waters had been communicated prior to the shoot and were acknowledged during planning discussions. Investigators also noted that nighttime filming conditions, combined with high-intensity lighting and the LED surfboard, significantly altered visibility dynamics in the water, particularly during fall and recovery moments. The case was later referenced in broader discussions on commercial surf production safety in biologically active coastal environments, especially where sponsor-driven visual requirements intersect with known environmental risk factors. The final footage from the shoot was never released. The next one doesn't look urgent at first. It starts out sounding like a normal injury and gets misread while it's already getting worse. It was March 14th, 2016. A regional indoor arena in Evansville, Indiana, was hosting an amateur wrestling tournament with mats, folding chairs, and spectators lined along the walls as afternoon brackets progressed. Caleb Rourke, 29, was a public high school physical education teacher and volunteer junior varsity wrestling coach who also competed in the regional 185-pound amateur division. He had no professional sponsorship and balanced full-time work with weekend competition while supporting his wife Amber and their 6-year-old son Theo, who often attended tournaments with him. The event was run by a regional amateur federation using volunteer staffing and an on-site medical presence, presented as a certified athletic trainer responsible for injuries, basic assessments, and sideline triage. The individual in that role was identified as Adrian Voss, 41, who claimed certification credentials that were never independently verified. Caleb won his first match pretty clean. Then the second one turned into a long, tough bout that went into overtime with heavy grappling and constant pressure on his chest and upper back. After it ended, he sat down near the mat and said he had a sudden sharp pain in his chest that was going into his back. Over the next few minutes, it just kept getting worse, and he started feeling other symptoms too. During this interval, Caleb remained reclined while the condition progressed, as initial assessment did not immediately identify the vascular nature of the emergency.
It just looked like pain after a hard match, something you see all the time in those rooms.
Adrian Voss performed only a brief visual and palpation-based assessment and did not escalate for immediate emergency transport despite symptoms consistent with possible cardiovascular injury, including severe chest pain radiating into the back. In such settings, protocol would prioritize rapid EMS activation over extended on-site evaluation when vascular emergency is suspected. He focused on surface-level tenderness and range of motion, interpreting Caleb's severe chest pain radiating into his back as a musculoskeletal issue. Caleb was told it was likely a muscle strain or rib irritation and advised to rest and avoid exertion instead of being escalated for emergency evaluation. During this delay in escalation, Caleb remained reclined without urgent transport as the condition progressed.
Unknown to those present, an acute tear had likely initiated in the ascending aorta just above the heart, with rapid propagation occurring under sustained arterial pressure following intense exertion.
His condition kept getting worse, he turned pale, was sweating, getting weaker, with cold hands and feet and trouble speaking. At first, teammates thought it was just exhaustion, but he kept declining until he couldn't sit up anymore, and they only called emergency services when it was clearly serious. By then, it wasn't about soreness anymore. People could see something was seriously wrong. Paramedics arrived and documented severe hypotension with unequal pulses between arms, indicating major vascular compromise. He was transported under emergency care with resuscitation in progress, but went into cardiac arrest during transit and died before hospital arrival. Resuscitation briefly restored cardiac activity, but he could not be stabilized and was pronounced dead later that day. Post-incident examination confirmed a type A aortic dissection near the aortic root, with the tear propagating through the vessel wall and causing extensive bleeding into the mediastinum and chest cavity, with secondary compression of the left lung and surrounding structures, without external injury. Cause of death was catastrophic vascular rupture leading to obstructive shock and cardiac failure, with likely underlying connective tissue weakness increasing susceptibility under exertion. An official review identified delayed recognition of a vascular emergency as a contributing factor, alongside reliance on an unverified medical provider operating beyond lawful scope. The provider was later found to have falsified credentials and was convicted of practicing medicine without a license and fraudulent misrepresentation, receiving incarceration and probation. Civil proceedings were settled, and the organization implemented mandatory third-party verification for medical personnel.
This next case moves away from contact injuries. Nothing sudden from the outside, it builds slowly during long effort and just gets brushed off at first.
It was October 12, 2014. The Rock River City Marathon in Rockford, Illinois ran its 7th annual event along a river corridor with a mid-sized field of runners and a finish area staffed by emergency personnel and volunteers handling post-race recovery cases. Sophia Garza, 28, was a 4th grade public school teacher who had been running marathons since 2011 as a personal goal, completing 4 prior races with modest times and documenting her training in a small bilingual blog, followed mainly by students' families and co-workers. For this race, she ran to honor her classroom, with each student signing her forearm before the start as a personal dedication.
You can tell she wasn't just running for herself that day.
She followed standard endurance guidance, regularly drinking at aid stations, but over several hours, her fluid intake exceeded her body's ability to maintain electrolyte balance. In the later miles, she developed a worsening headache, hand swelling, and confusion, which she attributed to exhaustion. She finished the marathon at 4:47, looking exhausted and a bit disoriented, and was helped over to the medical tent. She was moving slowly but still responsive, and at first it was thought to be just severe exertion and dehydration. Unbeknownst to her, the issue was dilutional hyponatremia. Fluid intake exceeded sodium replacement and renal clearance capacity during prolonged exertion, leading to progressively falling blood sodium levels. This acute hyponatremia caused water to shift into her cells, including brain tissue, where swelling began developing inside the rigid confines of the skull. As she rested after finishing, the imbalance continued to worsen internally. Her confusion deepened, her responses slowed further, and her condition shifted from fatigue into neurological dysfunction. What initially looked like post-marathon exhaustion was actually progressive cerebral edema driven by falling sodium levels, with water continuing to shift into brain cells and increasing pressure inside the fixed space of the skull. People nearby probably just thought she needed time to recover. Over the next while, her condition got worse. She went from confused to disoriented and agitated until she hit a point where she had a full seizure, lost consciousness, and her breathing became abnormal.
At that stage, it was clear that this wasn't dehydration, and emergency help was finally called.
As time passed without rapid correction of her sodium imbalance, her neurological condition continued to deteriorate. Recurrent seizures followed, separated by brief, unstable periods of reduced responsiveness, with her body unable to maintain normal brain electrical activity. Despite supportive care, her condition worsened, and increasing intracranial pressure led to downward displacement of brain structures, a late-stage and critical sign of irreversible injury. She was transported to a hospital for advanced treatment, but by the time corrective treatment was fully underway, prolonged cerebral edema and neuronal injury had reached a critical threshold with poor neurological prognosis. Despite intensive care, she did not regain consciousness. She was later declared brain dead due to global cerebral edema and loss of brainstem function, with acute exercise-associated hyponatremia identified as the underlying cause. Medical findings confirmed dangerously low sodium levels consistent with excessive fluid intake during endurance exertion, with no structural injury or external trauma present. The cause of death was determined to be fatal cerebral edema resulting from electrolyte imbalance. A review of her case concluded that the condition developed gradually and silently during the race, driven entirely by overhydration in the context of prolonged physical exertion. What made it particularly dangerous was that early symptoms closely resembled dehydration and fatigue, delaying recognition until neurological collapse occurred. Sophia's final blog entry, written days before the marathon, described her preparation and her students' encouragement. The banner they made for her remained hanging in her classroom after her death, unchanged for the rest of the school year.
That one stays internal and quiet for a while. The next one flips back to something external and immediate, a single moment event.
It was June 17th, 2017. A municipal stadium in Texas hosted a semi-professional soccer match on a city field with metal infrastructure, including light poles, fencing, and a steel goal frame not independently grounded. A severe thunderstorm watch was in effect that afternoon. Marlon Reyes, 26, was a goalkeeper for a local semi-pro soccer team in North Texas. He worked full-time as an HVAC technician and spent weekends coaching kids soccer while supporting his wife Valeria and their 2 children. He was just weeks away from finishing the final steps toward his US citizenship after years of living and working in the country. During the match, lightning activity was visible on the horizon, but play continued after a brief sideline check determined the storm would likely arrive after the scheduled end of the game. As conditions gradually worsened, Marlon repositioned himself at the north goal, staying close to the metal frame and placing both hands on the crossbar while waiting for the next phase of play.
The surface beneath him was already damp from earlier light rain, and wind gusts were beginning to push across the field, but no formal stoppage was issued. The goal area started feeling less like a position here.
A lightning strike hit a nearby stadium light pole, sending a powerful surge through the grounding system into nearby metal structures. The electricity spread through connected parts, like the fence and the metal goal frame, depending on how everything was grounded and where contact was made. When it reached him, it passed through his body at multiple contact points, including where he was in contact with the wet field before overwhelming him almost instantly. The rapid discharge caused immediate neuromuscular disruption, stripping voluntary control almost instantly. He collapsed immediately due to sudden neuromuscular disruption and loss of motor control, falling backward onto the field without protective reflexes. Players and officials initially hesitated, momentarily unsure if the collapse was due to impact or injury, before realizing he was unresponsive. Within moments, teammates sprinted toward the goal as the referee signaled for emergency assistance. He had no detectable pulse when responders reached him, and CPR was initiated immediately on the field. A defibrillator was applied after rhythm assessment, and a shock was delivered while CPR continued. A brief return of organized cardiac activity was observed, but it quickly deteriorated despite ongoing resuscitation. He was transported with continued advanced life support but did not regain sustained cardiac function and was pronounced dead later that evening. Post-mortem examination confirmed severe electrical injury consistent with lightning exposure. External burns were present on both hands at contact points with the metal goal and a small exit burn on the lower extremity. Internally, no gross structural cardiac damage was identified, but fatal disruption of the heart's electrical conduction system was consistent with lightning-induced injury. Investigators concluded that the stadium's metal infrastructure created a conductive path that allowed lightning energy to travel through connected fixtures. A formal review criticized the decision to continue play despite visible lightning activity and nearby thunder, noting reliance on visual monitoring and judgment-based delay decisions rather than strict lightning detection thresholds or enforced stoppage protocols. The officiating referee submitted a resignation months later, citing the incident as the determining factor. The league suspended outdoor play for the remainder of the season and introduced a mandatory lightning detection and automatic stoppage policy for all matches. Afterwards, every delay call started feeling heavier than it used to. Marlin's citizenship interview had been scheduled for early July. After his death, his family pursued posthumous completion of his naturalization process through legal advocacy channels. The request was approved, and his certificate of citizenship was formally presented to his wife and children later that year. After that, it slows down again. No instant incident, just conditions, heat, and what the body is put through over time. It was July 22, 2015. A privately operated multi-day football training camp in rural Louisiana ran on open grass fields under extreme summer heat with minimal shade and basic outdoor facilities used for both practice and recovery. Rashad Polk, 19, was a recent high school graduate from Baton Rouge and an offensive lineman who had earned a partial scholarship offer to play college football. He was known for his consistency, size, and work ethic, and was weeks away from moving into university housing for the first time as a first-generation college student. The camp ran intensive two-a-day practices in full pads under high heat and humidity, with limited recovery infrastructure. After an afternoon session in which the heat index exceeded safe athletic thresholds, players were directed to large 5-gallon plastic barrels filled with standing water placed outdoors and improvised as makeshift cooling tubs due to limited recovery infrastructure. Rashad, overheated and physically exhausted, entered one of the barrels and submerged himself fully, including his head, seeking rapid relief from the heat. The water had been left stagnant and untreated in outdoor conditions for several days, exposed to direct sunlight and high temperatures that allowed microbial growth. Just trying to cool off fast, no hesitation, no second thought. He didn't know the stagnant water had conditions where Naegleria fowleri, a rare amoeba found in warm, fresh water, can survive. It can enter through the nose during full submersion and travel up the nerve pathways into the brain. In the days that followed, Rashad showed no obvious symptoms and continued participating in camp activities normally. Near the end of camp, he began to develop a severe headache, nausea, and unusual fatigue that staff initially attributed to heat exposure and exhaustion from repeated practices in extreme conditions. Over the next day, his condition deteriorated rapidly. He developed vomiting, neck stiffness, fever, and increasing confusion, eventually struggling to maintain balance or recognize familiar people consistently. At first, people around him assumed that it was just heat exhaustion from camp and told him to rest it off. But as he started forgetting simple things and couldn't even steady himself, it became clear that something was seriously wrong. As his neurological condition worsened and he became increasingly disoriented, he was removed from activities and transported for emergency medical evaluation. At the hospital, initial testing suggested severe meningitis based on elevated white blood cell counts in cerebrospinal fluid. He was immediately placed on broad-spectrum antibiotics for suspected bacterial infection, but his condition continued to deteriorate despite treatment. Further laboratory analysis identified Naegleria fowleri in the cerebrospinal fluid through specialized testing, confirming primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. By that point, the infection had already spread extensively through brain tissue, causing severe inflammation and widespread destruction of neural structures. Despite emergency anti-amoebic treatment obtained through specialized channels, the disease progressed rapidly. Rashad lost consciousness within days of being in the hospital and quickly developed complete neurological failure. Scans showed severe irreversible brain damage from the infection. He was later declared brain dead, life support was stopped after medical confirmation, and he was pronounced dead 9 days after the initial exposure. A post-incident review concluded that infection occurred through nasal exposure to untreated stagnant water under conditions known to support amoeba growth, with investigators noting that outdoor barrels used for full-body immersion created a preventable risk in extreme heat where microbial proliferation is accelerated. Legal proceedings resulted in regulatory sanctions and civil liability findings related to unsafe use of untreated standing water, and the facility was permanently shut down. State regulations were later updated to prohibit the use of untreated standing water for athlete immersion or cooling. Rashad's scholarship was honored posthumously. His former coach attended his funeral, and his duffel bag remained packed in his room, still ready for a departure that never came. That one builds over days. The last case goes to structure and equipment, something physical giving way while people are still moving around it. It was February 6, 2016. A high school gym in Carrollton, Texas, had been converted into a gymnastics meet venue after flooding forced a last-minute relocation, leaving a hardwood basketball court not designed for permanent apparatus installation or high-load anchoring systems. Kiaz Nair, 19, was a level 7 competitive gymnast known for her precision on uneven bars and long-term consistency in training. She had competed since childhood, balanced athletics with academics, and was regarded within her club as one of the most reliable performers in her division. Because of the emergency venue change, the uneven bars were installed outside of standard certification procedures. The system was anchored using commercially available hardware rather than engineered, load-rated floor mounts designed for dynamic gymnastics forces. No formal structural inspection or torque testing was completed prior to competition. People were still setting things up even as others were warming up nearby. Earlier athletes completed routines on the apparatus without incident, primarily using lower dynamic elements that did not significantly stress the structure. The setup appeared stable under limited load, and minor flexing was attributed to the temporary flooring conditions rather than structural instability. During her routine, Keys moved through her elements cleanly before going into a high-release move that put a sudden burst of force through the bars. At the moment she let go, a small timing difference in her grip shifted the load unevenly, putting much more force on one side of the apparatus. That uneven load exceeded the capacity of the non-certified anchoring system. One side of the apparatus began to fail at the floor mount, and the structural imbalance rapidly propagated through the frame. Within fractions of a second, one upright began to fail at the floor mount, and the instability rapidly propagated across the frame. The opposing side lost support almost immediately afterward, causing the entire system to rotate forward as a single rigid structure under combined load and momentum. The uneven bars collapsed while she was still in motion. The crossbar struck her during the fall, interrupting her rotation mid-air, and she landed on the mat beneath the descending frame. The apparatus followed through immediately after impact, coming to rest across her upper torso and head area, severely restricting movement and preventing effective self-extrication before responders could begin intervention. There's that brief silence right after, like the room hasn't caught up yet. Medical response was initiated immediately, with CPR performed on-site before she was transported by air ambulance to a level 1 trauma center in Dallas. Despite rapid intervention, imaging confirmed catastrophic head trauma, including a basal skull fracture, severe intracranial bleeding, and brainstem compression, consistent with non-survivable injury. She was declared brain dead later that day, and life support was withdrawn after doctors confirmed there was no surgical or critical care treatment that could reverse the damage. A post-incident investigation found that the apparatus had been installed without required engineering specifications for dynamic gymnastics loads, including certified steel anchoring and reinforced subfloor mounting. The failure was attributed to improper installation, lack of structural verification, and the use of non-rated hardware in a high-risk competitive setting. Experts noted that temporary flooring combined with non-engineered anchors created a critical failure point under high-release movement forces, which can multiply load several times beyond static body weight. Legal proceedings resulted in a conviction for criminally negligent homicide, along with probation, community service, and restitution, while civil liability was later settled. Following the incident, national gymnastics regulations were updated to require certified installation of all structural apparatus in temporary venues and prohibit non-engineered assembly without verified load documentation and engineering approval. Chies's coach retired the following season, and her family later established a safety initiative focused on equipment certification and structural compliance in competitive gymnastics.